Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the quiet, fragrant corners of old Istanbul, where the air smells like spiced smoke and roasted wonder. You're about to step through time and into an Ottoman coffeehouse, where poets duel with metaphors, parrots recite gossip, and someone definitely plays backgammon too loudly. You'll fit in fine, probably that is, if you can avoid getting kicked out for holding your cup wrong, talking too much, or accidentally insulting a local judge's haircut with an ill-timed proverb. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to a soft clatter, hooves echoing off stone, merchants rolling open wooden stalls, the distant call of a muezzin swirling through the sunrise air like ribbon smoke. You're lying on a woven mat, rolled out in a quiet upper-floor room overlooking the rooftops of 16th century Istanbul. You stretch slowly, blinking against the blush-colored sky, your limbs still groggy from time travel. The city is stirring, and with it, a scent floats up, warm, bitter, earthy. Coffee or sandals slip on cobbles as you walk downhill, trailing a thin ribbon of steam. You're not following a map, you're following your nose. The streets wind like lazy rivers, curving between arched doorways and tall, leaning houses painted in sun-faded indigos and ochres. Laundry flutters above you like flags in some peaceful battle between neighbors. A boy selling sesame rings nods at you. A cat ignores you. Another cat ignores you harder. Eventually, you turn a corner, and there it is, a modest building, tucked between a spice shop and what might be a calligrapher's studio, breathes out a puff of fragrant air as someone opens the carved wooden door. You're not sure what you expected. Domes Instead, it looks a bit like a friend's warm attic. Low ceilings, crooked wooden beams, and a sign shaped like a steaming cup hanging slightly askew. You duck your head and step inside. The interior greets you with layers: scent, sound, shadow, coffee, yes, but also smoke from a long, slow hookah, orange peels curling on a plate, the sharp tang of cardamom in the air. Somewhere in the back, someone's laughing too hard, too early. Everything is brown, gold, and glowing. Woven carpets smother the floor in pattern. The benches are more like wide wooden shelves, with cushions that threaten to swallow your knees. You settle in with less grace than you intended. You're definitely not from around here. A few heads turn: an old man with a turban resting just so, a young woman writing something into the margins of a paper scroll, two men playing backgammon with enough intensity to scare a horse. They glance at you, then glance away. A quiet test. You passed, probably. Behind the counter, if you can call it that, since it's more of a table, with an elegant copper kettle the size of a goater man, with elegant eyebrows and a beard as tidy as a miniature garden, is making coffee, but not just making it, he's performing it. There is no rush. The sezve, a long-handled pot with a narrow neck, sits nestled in warm sand. He slowly stirs the mixture: finely ground beans, cold water, sugar maybe, spices if you're lucky, and lets it foam just once. He lifts it, waits, foams again. You blink slowly. You might already be relaxed, and then before you can speak, a cup is placed in front of you. It's tiny, elegant, no handle. The surface quivers with dark froth, and it smells like deep earth and burnt magic. You pick it up. It's hot. Your fingertips protest, then give in. You sip. It's bitter, like really bitter, but something about the bitterness makes your shoulders loosen. This is a drink for sitting, not rushing. You sip again, and somehow you understand it better. You close your eyes. For a moment, the world simplifies. Heat, ground beans, quiet voices. You begin to hear what's happening around you. A man is softly reciting something in a melodic tone. Not prayer, not conversation, something in between. A poem, maybe. Across the room, a parrot squawks. Yusuf owes me 2 walnuts, and a secret, it says. You freeze. The room doesn't. Everyone acts like that was normal. You try not to laugh out loud, but a small snort escapes. Someone nearby smirks into their cup. You sip again. This, it turns out, is Istanbul's newest coffeehouse. Well, it was new in 1554. 2 Syrian merchants opened it near the Totakali district. People were suspicious at first. What was this? strange black drink that made you feel sharp and oddly sociable. Historians still wonder if it was the drink itself that won people over or the excuse it provided to gather without obligation. In the Ottoman world, where the public baths had their rules and the mosques had their reverence, the coffee house became something looser, warmer, more human. And the beans. They traveled a long way, grown in Yemen, roasted with care, brought up by ship or camel or bribe. The drink, bitter as it was, carried the taste of trade, of stories, of someone else's sunrise. You sit a little deeper into the cushion. Your fingers curl naturally around the little cup now. A bowl of roasted chickpeas is offered. You nod politely and take a few. There, unexpectedly perfect. Outside, a cart rolls past. You hear the creak of wood and the soft brush of sandals on stone. Inside, someone begins tuning a stringed instrument. It's too early in the day for music, you think. And then you remember, it's not a day anymore. It's a story. You lean back just enough to test the cushion's loyalty. It gives a soft sigh, but holds. The little cup rests in your palm like it belongs there now. You've earned your seat. Probably across the room. The man playing the stringed instrument, oud, you realize, strums a few hesitant notes, adjusting pegs and humming quietly to himself. He's not performing yet. He's waiting for the mood to settle, for the coffee to take root. Next to you, a new figure has appeared on the bench. You didn't see him sit down, which is mildly alarming. His older grey beard, many rings, the faint scent of rose water. He gives you a nod that could mean hello or please don't ask questions. He reaches for the bowl of roasted chickpeas, grabs 3, tosses 2 into his mouth, and tucks the third under the cuff of his sleeve. You raise an eyebrow. He nods again. Insurance, he says, and says no more. Moments later, he speaks again. As if continuing a conversation neither of you remembers starting. First time in a coffee house, you nod. You're new here, and possibly in the wrong century, but that feels too much to explain. He chuckles. Careful, you blink too long and it becomes a second home. You blink, experimentally. See, he says. Too late. You smile and sip again. Let me teach you something, he says. Not the fancy poetry, or the conspiracy theories, or the story about the baker's cousin with the donkey that sings in Greek. Not yet. He leans in slightly. Let me teach you the rules. He says it like it's a sacred code, which, to be fair, it kind of is. Rule 1, he says. You don't ask for sugar. You either are sweet or you suffer. You make a note of that. Rule 2, if someone's telling a story and they pause, never guess the ending. You'll ruin both the moment and your standing. Rule 3, if the parrot talks to you, answer politely. You glance toward the parrot, now perched in an arched window, preening one wing and muttering something about taxes. Your new friend leans back, content. The coffee house has filled in a little more since you arrived. A group of men are now sitting near the wall, their slippers neatly aligned beside them like sleeping ducks. A woman enters carrying a small basket. She's selling figs and tiny scrolls of poetry, side by side. A bold business model. And now you see it. This place isn't just a place to drink something bitter and ancient. It's a room made of pauses, a theater of little silences, filled by story and steam. The walls don't echo, they absorb. You hear laughter, but it's not loud. It's the kind of laughter that has seen things. And there's more to this space than just the front room. A narrow hallway leads deeper into the building. You see shadows moving in a back courtyard, a glimpse of greener fig tree. Maybe, somewhere beyond the wall, water trickles from a stone spout. Do you know, your cushion companion says, as if to himself, there was once a time when this, he gestures with his coffee cup, was considered a threat. You look at your cup. It seems harmless, comforting even. They said it stirred people up too much. He goes on. Made them talk. Made them think. It's always thinking that gets you into trouble. He's not wrong. Some judges tried to ban it, he adds. Didn't last long. They liked it too much. You nod slowly. Historians still wonder if those early bans were truly about morality, or just fear of too many minds waking up in one room. Outside, the sky is shifting. What was once warm amber is turning into the silvery hue of late morning. You can feel it in your bones, even if you're a time traveler. Someone new is sitting at the table nearest the door. He's younger, wearing a faded red sash and carrying a scroll case that looks suspiciously well worn. He unrolls a piece of parchment, mutters to himself, and immediately drops it into his cup. A collective wince travels through the room like a breeze. He pulls it out, dripping, and attempts to read it anyway. That's Haroon, your benchmate murmurs. He's a poet, technically. You sip again. The oud begins to planet a song. Exactly, more of a gentle wandering of notes, like someone tuning their thoughts aloud. The parrot flaps to a lower perch, closer to the warmth of the stove. It sighs. You understand. There's a rhythm to this place, and it's not hurried. You're not expected to entertain or explain yourself. You're allowed to be as long as you respect the flow. Contribute a laugh or a proverb, and keep your slippers tidy. You notice a man near the back wall cleaning a brass coffee pot with deliberate care. He hums as he works. Not a tune you recognize, but it seems older than the floorboards dot in a corner. Two people are playing some kind of game. You think it's chess, but the pieces are shaped like birds and snakes. One player moves a snake, then immediately sips their coffee as if the act seals the move. Your benchmate speaks again. You see what this place is, don't you? You glance around. Yes, maybe. It's a slow revolution in slippers. You raise an eyebrow. He explains. Here, you don't have to belong to a guild. You don't have to speak perfect Turkish. You don't even need a reason to sit. You just show up, sip, listen. Maybe, if you're lucky, you speak. It's freedom. You realize, polished with ritual, softened by warmth, wrapped in smoke and spice. He clinks his cup gently against yours. To your first cup, he says. To the second, you reply, surprising yourself. And then, as if summoned by your budding confidence, the coffeehouse keeper calls from the front. Would you like another? You smile. Yes, you would. You cradle your second cup like it's a baby owl worm, slightly unpredictable, and possibly capable of changing your life if handled correctly. This one's darker, stronger, less hesitant. Maybe it's you, maybe it's the beans. Either way, the second cup settles differently in your body, like a story waiting to be told. You're mid-sip when your neighbor still, nestled beside you like a seasoned houseplant, leans in with a conspiratorial squint. Now, he says, you've passed the test. It's time to learn the etiquette. You raise an eyebrow. You thought you'd just learned the rules. He waves a hand dismissively. Those were survival tactics. This is performance. The parrot squawks he doesn't even know about. The hand signal. You glanced nervously at your own hands, as if they might betray you. Don't panic, your guide says. This isn't the court of Suleiman, it's a coffeehouse. But still there are ways things are done. He begins his lesson by demonstrating how to hold the cup, not like a mug, not like you're at a tavern. You cradle it, thumb and forefinger, only keep your pinky ambiguous, neither raised like nobility nor clenched like a brawler. You're not drinking, he explains. You're participating. You adjust your grip. Better. He nods. Now, the nod. When someone offers a proverb, you nod slowly, never too eagerly. That makes you look like you're trying to impress someone, and never too late, or you'll look confused. You practice a nod, good, unreadable, yet thoughtful. Like a man who's misplaced a fortune but learned something about bread in the process. You try not to laugh into your cup. Now, if someone tells a story, you do not interrupt. You do not comment on their pacing. You do not correct a historical detail even if it is wildly inaccurate. You nod. You sip. You listen. This is not a debate hall. You nod. Sip. Listen. The coffee agrees with the rhythm, and under no circumstances, he adds, do you attempt to tell a story longer than 8 minutes, unless you've been invited to do so. You pause. That one sounds oddly specific. Haroon tried it once, he whispers. He's still recovering. You glance toward Haroon. He's staring blankly at a scroll that may or may not be poetry, and mouthing words that probably don't rhyme. But now, the atmosphere begins to change. The man who'd been playing the oud earlier gives it a final tuning twist, then sets it aside. He stands, tall, lean, wrapped in a deep blue robe that glimmers like lake water just before dusk. A hush settles, soft, not sudden. Even the parrot hops up a rung. Your neighbor smiles. Ah, he says, we have a master in the house. The man clears his throat, not dramatically, just enough to say, I'm here. A few heads turn. A woman puts down her embroidery. Someone uncorks a tiny ink bottle, just in case. He begins. It isn't loud. He doesn't need to be. The verses spill out like honey, not too fast, never rushed. The words are thick with rhythm and just the right amount of ambiguity. You catch bits about longing, lost rivers, a bird that sings only after dark, and a shoemaker who might be a god. You don't understand every word, but the cadence carries you. It doesn't matter. You feel it, like heat through a tiled floor. The parrot lets out a reverent whistle. Your neighbor leans close again. There are different schools of coffeehouse performance, he murmurs. This one, his old style. Melancholy, symbol-heavy. Once did a full verse about cucumbers that made 3 people weep, and 1 man renounce dentistry. You blink, nod, sip. As the poet finishes, the room exhales. Someone claps once, someone else snaps their fingers. A third person offers a solemn toast with their cup. It's not a performance, it's an offering. You're just about to add your own slow nod when the woman with the embroidery speaks. That was lovely, she says, but I still prefer the one about the donkey and the borrowed slippers. The room chuckles. The spell breaks gently. And just like that, the mood slides from poetry to chatter. Your neighbor is watching you. Now you've seen it. He says. You nod. Not all poets are so polished, of course. He adds, some are more spontaneous. He gestures toward a man at the far end of the room who appears to be using a sugar cube as a metaphor for regret. Poetry, your guide continues, is the true currency here. Not coins, not favors, not even gossip. Though, he smirks, gossip has its place. He offers you a small plate, something sweet, round, and sticky. Pismini, he says, like cotton, but made of sugar and regret. You take a bite. It melts like a wistful dream. And, he says, there are hand signals. You freeze. Not complicated, he assures you. Mostly used by storytellers and gamblers to signal a need for silence, or another cup, or that someone's lying. You glance around. 1 man subtly taps the side of his nose. Another scratches behind his ear with a spoon. See, your neighbor whispers. The whole place is alive, talking without ever raising its voice. You suddenly feel like the room is a living thing and you're inside it, being digested gently by warmth, words, and caffeine. Outside, the light shifts again. Shadows stretch along the tiled floor. Someone opens the door, letting in a slice of sunlight and the scent of rose blossoms from a nearby garden. Inside, the parrot mutters. He's learning. Slowly, but learning. You smile and sip. You're just starting to feel like you belong. Here 2 cups in a solid grasp on the nodding protocols, and only 1 accidental breach of the mysterious ear-scratching code win. A flutter of wings slices the air above your head. The parrot has taken flight. With all the elegance of a slightly tipsy poet. It flaps in a crooked arc and lands on the low archway beam directly above you. It ruffles its feathers with theatrical precision, looks you dead in the eye, and says, don't trust the man with the honey dates. You blink, then look around. There are 3 men in the room with honey dates. You raise your cup in a subtle toast to them all, just in case. The parrot hops twice, then whistles a tune you could swear is suspiciously similar to the opening of a love song. It puffs up with pride, then begins to recite. Her eyes were like boiled lentils in moonlight. Her voice sweet as figs, but twice as sticky. A round of gentle laughter moves through the room like incensed smoke. The parrot, clearly pleased. Bose, written by Hoffice, it says, improved by me. You glance at your neighbor, who nods solemnly. Best poet in the building, he says. The bird whistles. Second best. It corrects. You weren't expecting to have an avian literary mentor today, and yet, here you are, considering whether it's polite to compliment a parrot's meter. Just then, the coffeehouse keeper appears again with a small silver tray. On it, a fresh seive of coffee, a dish of almonds, and 1 very small, very opinionated slice of dried apricot. It stares at you. You've made an impression, the keeper says dryly. He doesn't talk to just anyone. You glance upward. The parrot fluffs its feathers again and begins grooming its wing like a diva adjusting a silk scarf. There's debate. Your neighbor whispers about how old he is. Some say he's been here since the first coffeehouse opened. Others say he used to belong to a poet who drank too much and told too little. Or, the parrot interrupts, I am the poet. A beat. Hard to argue with that. Parrots, you learn, were once common in Ottoman coffeehouses, not just as exotic pets, but as part of the ambience. The empire's vast trade networks meant you could find creatures from every corner of the world. Peacocks, monkeys, even an occasional bear, though the bear was retired early after a particularly disastrous chess incident. But parrots stayed. They listened, they memorized, they repeated, sometimes with alarming accuracy. There's even a theory among the regulars that some parrots were used by the state to monitor conversation. You glance upward. The parrot sneezes and mutters, "Down with taxes." Maybe not. Still, you wonder how much of this place's memory is stored in feathers. The woman with the embroidery walks past and gently pats the parrot on the wing. "He told me my husband was seeing a calligrapher," she says. "Turned out to be true. That bird saved me 3 years." You nod slowly. You're not sure whether to trust it or be mildly terrified of it. Both, probably. The oud player, now returned to his cushion, speaks up. "I once heard that this bird corrected the spelling of a poem mid-recital." The parrot shrugs. "He rhymed moon with soon. I had to intervene." The laughter returns low, warm, appreciative. You find yourself smiling more easily now, your body sinking deeper into the cushion. Your mind, uncoiling from modern knots, begins to stretch itself across centuries. The coffee house is many things: a haven, a stage, a rumor incubator, and now, apparently, an editorial committee with feathers. And yet, for all the myth, there's something oddly sacred in this chaos. You listen to the sounds around you: the scrape of a chair leg, the soft crunch of roasted almonds, the long, thoughtful inhale of someone about to say something important and possibly untrue. There's a kind of music to it, an ambient symphony of leisure and language. Your neighbor leans closer. In some cities, parrots like this were trained to greet customers. You nod. You can imagine it. Others, he adds, were said to carry bits of poetry in their claws, dropping them like petals on favored guests. You glance up. The parrot is preoccupied with balancing on one leg and muttering something that sounds suspiciously like a love letter to a walnut. Of course. Your neighbor continues. "Some people didn't like it. Said it made the coffee house too lively." Distracted from contemplation. "Philistines," the parrot hisses. Another round of laughter. You wonder how many of the regulars come here for the coffee, and how many just come for the bird. Across the room, Haroon the poet with the scroll problems is nervously offering the parrot a piece of dried fig. The parrot takes it, then drops it, then fluffs its feathers and says, "Try again." You sip again, letting the warmth carry you deeper into this tapestry of idiosyncrasy. The caffeine hums quietly beneath your skin. Not a buzz, but a gentle conversation with your blood. Somewhere outside, a call to prayer echoes faintly over the tiled rooftops. You can hear the world beyond these walls, but here, inside, everything feels suspended. A soft exhale of time, a held breath. A moment later, the parrot resumes its perch, closing one eye and leaning into the afternoon light slanting through the window. Your neighbor whispers, "That means it likes you, or it's plotting your downfall. Either way, progress." You sip again. "Maybe you'll bring the bird a poem tomorrow." The parrot has dozed off, now one foot curled, feathers slightly puffed, murmuring something about lentils in its sleep. You take that as your cue to stretch out just a bit more, careful not to spill the last third of your cup. The coffee's cooled, but it's still strong enough to hold your thoughts in place like a good line of verse. You're starting to feel less like a visitor and more like part of the furnishings, worn in, fragrant, slightly caffeinated. Around you, conversations soften, then fade. There's a quiet shift in energy, like everyone has agreed, without saying it, that now is the time for stories. Not the loud ones, not the performative tales of traveling merchants or janissaries home on leave, but the slow, winding stories, told just above a whisper. The ones with pauses longer than sentences. The ones meant more for listening than responding. The coffee house dims slightly as someone trims a wick. Outside, the light has softened to gold. Inside, it's pure amber. A man in the corner who looks like he's been here since the reign of Suleiman, if not earlier, clears his throat and begins to speak. No introduction, no preamble, just a phrase floating out into the room. It began, as many things do, with a stolen spoon. There's a slight shuffle of cushions as listeners lean in. You lean too. He's got the kind of voice that sounds like it was aged in cedar. Every syllable rolls out like smoke curling from a candle, thick with implication and a hint of mischief. And just like that, you're hooked. His story winds through a souk, a tailor's apprentice, and an accidentally enchanted tea kettle. At some point, there's a cat that becomes a prince, or maybe a prince who becomes a cat. The details aren't exactly clear, but no one minds. In this place, stories don't have to make sense. They just have to feel true. This is the power of the Ottoman coffeehouse less lecture hall, more dream-sharing den. Oral storytelling here isn't just entertainment, it's a form of memory, a way to keep culture alive without ever picking up a pen. You realize the walls of this place have absorbed centuries of tales. It's as if the wooden beams themselves are held together with gossip, poetry, and a touch of rosewater syrup. And sometimes, the best stories aren't told by people at all. You catch snippets of someone else's tailorman at the next table, gesturing wildly with a crust of bread, and when she opened the jarbam, 40 pickled olives flew out, singing. Laughter erupts again. Soft, knowing laughter. The kind shared by those who've heard it before, and still enjoy the punchline. Then, there's a pause. Not awkward, just space for breath, for refilling cups, for letting words settle like grounds at the bottom of a demitasse. You look around and notice that everyone here is both an audience and a performer. There's no stage, no script, just rhythm, like jazz, but brewed instead of blown. You sip again. Here's a curious thing. Historians believe that some Ottoman coffeehouses had official storytellers, professional medders, who wandered between shops, memorizing epic tales and weaving in local flavor. They used props, changed voices, played with pacing. Each performance was different, shaped by the room, the weather, or the day's headlines. Today's headline: "The parrot dislikes figs but approves of rhymes." A classic. But not all stories were epics. Some were practical. How to sneak into a spice market after hours. How to cure hiccups with garlic and prayer. How to politely decline a duel without losing face. Others were deeply personal. You overhear a young man quietly telling someone about his lost brother vanished on a trade caravan to Busra. He's been coming here every week since, hoping someone might know something. Or maybe he just wants to keep saying the name out loud. The listener says nothing, just refills the man's cup. That's enough. You glance at the parrot, one eye open now. It watches the room like a librarian watches over shelves gently, but with the ability to peck your ear if needed. You find yourself wanting to contribute. But what would you tell? Your trip here. A tale of mysterious furniture, caffeinated birds, and mild paranoia over historical etiquette. Actually, that might work, but not yet. Instead, you lean back, letting the sounds of language wash over you. A woman is reciting a poem about jasmine and memory. A man is arguing that soup tastes better if stirred only counterclockwise. Someone else claims they once saw a sultan in disguise buying meat pies at midnight. Are any of these stories true? Who knows? That's the beauty of it. Truth here is like the foam on your coffee. Soft, sweet, and likely to disappear if overanalyzed. And anyway, no one's here for facts. They're here for feeling. For that gentle thrum in your chest when a line of poetry hits just right. For the hush that falls over the room before a good punchline. For the way even a tall tale can carry the weight of something real. You're not sure how long you've been listening. Hours, minutes, it doesn't matter. Time in here is measured in stories told, cups poured, and the number of times the parrot sighs like an overworked librarian. Then, softly, someone begins humming. A lullaby maybe, or the echo of a song that once played at a wedding long gone. No one shushes them. No one joins in. It's just a loud a story with no words. You close your eyes for a moment. Outside, a cart rattles down the alley. A dog barks once. Distantly, a muezzin's call begins to rise, slow and sonorous. Inside, someone tells the tale of a prince who gave up his throne to open a bakery, and became far more powerful as a result. The parrot chirps in agreement. You smile. You're not just watching history anymore. You're sitting in the middle of it. Somewhere between the last tale of the baker prince and your fourth refill, the storyteller's voice drifts into silence. A moment passes, then another. You think it's over, but really it's just time for a different kind of story. The smell hits you first, thick, earthy, and darkly floral. A scent like hot soil after rain, like something ancient waking up in a clay pot. You follow your nose. It leads you behind the counter, past stacks of dented copper trays and a pile of tiny porcelain cups waiting for their next purpose in life. A young man with the suspicious energy of someone who hasn't slept since the fall of Constantinople notices you hovering. You want to see? He asks, already smirking. You nod, not quite sure what you've agreed to. He lifts a heavy wooden flap, revealing a back alcove, a sort of open kitchen, if you could call it that. Really, it's a narrow nook, walls stained with years of steam, spice, and innuendo. In the center, the most important tool in the empire, the CEZVE. It's not large, it doesn't sparkle. In fact, it looks like something an overworked potter gave up on halfway through. But to the Ottomans, it's holy. This tiny pot, long-handled and blackened by flame, is where magic happens. Forget your modern espresso machines with their worry and steaming and alarming noises. This thing hums with history. The young man whose name might be Yusuf, or possibly just Hey You, scoops fine, dark grounds into the sezv with the solemnity of a priest offering incense. There are rules, he says. Break them, and the coffee curses you. You raise a brow. He's kidding, probably. He points to the water, measured precisely, then to the sugar, added before the boil, then to the heat, sand, glorious, glowing, constantly shifting sand, warmed from beneath by charcoal. He buries the sezv into the sand up to its little copper neck. The sand swallows it like a hot bath. Slowly, the mixture begins to simmer, not boil. Never boil. That's sacrilege. The surface shivers like a secret trying to get out. You don't stir it once, it starts, Yusuf warns. That's how you ruin the foam. Apparently, in Ottoman coffee tradition, the foam is everything. It's the first sip, the crown, the punctuation mark at the beginning of the sentence. You watch as he coaxes the sezv in and out of the heat, like a dancer leading a partner through a particularly slow and sultry waltz. 3 times it rises. 3 times he pulls it back. On the final swell, he pours it gently into a cup the size of a thimble. You're handed the cup with the air of a knight, receiving a sacred relic. You sipped it. Thick. Not just in taste, but in experience. It coats your tongue, your thoughts, possibly your moral compass. There's grit at the bottom and poetry in the middle. It tastes like burnt fig, bitter chocolate, and the 5th chapter of a book you've never read but somehow remember. This, Yusuf says, crossing his arms with pride, is the proper way. You nod. Of course it is. It's also, you learn, the method that nearly caused a riot. In the early days, coffee was still controversial in the empire. Some religious authorities weren't thrilled with the idea of people gathering to sip a psychoactive bean water while discussing politics and poetry. They tried to ban it. Did it work? Not at all. In fact, the bans often had the opposite effect. People snuck cups behind curtains, brewed in basements, and disguised coffee shops as ink parlors, which sounds far cooler than it actually was, unless you were very into obscure calligraphy and caffeine. There's even a lesser-known tale. Historians still debate its accuracy about an old sheik who tried to prove coffee's evil by feeding it to a goat. The goat then danced for 2 hours, prompting the sheik to ban music instead. Why Yusuf doesn't know that one. He laughs though. I believe it. I once drank 3 cups and composed an entire opera in my head. Was it good? It was about lentils and betrayal. You sip again. Yep, this brew could inspire betrayal, possibly a revolution. It's that good. In fact, many believe coffee's popularity among intellectuals, poets, and revolutionaries wasn't just about taste. It was about clarity, focus, the ability to stay awake long enough to finish a thought, and then challenge someone else's. This wasn't just a drink. It was fuel for discourse, a quiet rebellion in a cup. And yet here, behind the scenes, it's humble. A few simple tools, a sacred rhythm, a handful of beans roasted until they surrendered their secrets. You watch as Yusuf prepares another sezv. This one's for an old man outside, who brings his own cup wrapped in linen. He says, "My cups are too modern." Yusuf shrugs. As he works, he teaches you the roast grades, light for delicate mornings, dark for poetry battles, something called burnt camel for heartbreak. You're not sure if that last one's real or just his idea of a joke. Want to try roasting? You hesitate, then nod. He shows you the pan, the beans, the motion. You swirl the pan over open coals, listening for the first crack like a whisper of thunder. It smells like wood smoke, cardamom, and sudden inspiration. You try not to sneeze. You fail. That's tradition, he assures you, handing you a cloth to wipe your nose. Everyone sneezes the first time. It's how the beans know you're real. There's a comfort in the ritual, something timeless, repetitive, but not dull. Like the morning sun rising over the same rooftop for 500 years. Eventually, you return to your seat. The parrot eyes you as if suspicious of your newfound barista energy. You offer it a soft squawk, just to establish dominance. It turns away. Behind the counter, the sand glows. The sezves rest like tiny cauldrons, ready for the next cup, the next story, the next sleepy soul. And you're no longer just a guest. You're becoming part of the rhythm. You've just begun to settle back into your seat, clutching your thick little cup like it holds the secrets of the universe. And honestly, maybe it does when you notice something peculiar. There's a man at the far end of the coffee house, sitting alone, pretending to read the same page of a manuscript for a very long time. Like, suspiciously long. Even the parrot has stopped side-eyeing patrons to give him a curious look. YUSUF, walking by with a tray of cups balanced on one hand like a caffeinated acrobat, mutters out of the corner of his mouth, "Don't look directly. That's a listener, you blink or what?" He leans in. A listener, a scribe for someone important. He doesn't drink. He doesn't tip. He just listens. Naturally, your eyes dart straight back to the man. Subtle. Yusuf sighs. "You'll get us all arrested." You quickly pivot to staring deeply into your coffee, as though contemplating your sins, which, at this point, might just be curiosity and a growing addiction to foam. So, spies, it turns out, yes. In the Ottoman Empire, coffeehouses had become so popular, so filled with opinions and unlicensed jokes, that the state started to worry. Because when people gather, they talk. And when people talk, things get said. Dangerous things, like, "Did you hear the Grand Vizier eats yogurt with honey?" Barbaric, or worse, that new tax. It smells fishier than the Bosphorus in July. So, the sultans sent ears, not literal ears, of course, though that would have made a very disturbing centerpiece. No, they sent men like the one now pretending to study his empty plate with religious intensity. They came in plain robes, carrying nothing but good posture and a memory like a silk-lined trap. Their job, to listen, to take mental notes, to report back to the palace with summaries of public sentiment, suspicious murmurs, or particularly biting satirical poems that might get a janissary's eyebrow twitching. Some of them even write things down. In code, Yusuf whispers, appearing again with a broom that he is not using, just twirling theatrically. Cursive Ottoman. You can barely read it if you're sober. You glance around. The coffeehouse has shifted slightly. The laughter is still there, but quieter now. Stories are told with more knowing smiles. Jokes land with an extra glance toward the shadows. Not fear, exactly. More like performance. A quiet ballet of words meant to entertain without offending the wrong person. Like stand-up comedy performed at a royal funeral. And yet, despite the spies, despite the subtle weight of watchful eyes, people still come, still talk, still whisper over dark brews and sweeter gossip. Because, really, where else are you going to learn that your neighbor's cousin's goat escaped because of a love triangle? The truth is, coffeehouses were more than just spots to drink and debate. They were the empire's unofficial newspapers, rumor mills, and sometimes its conscience. And the palace knew it. Historians still wonder, were the spies meant to suppress dissent or understand it? Some records suggest that sultans appreciated the unfiltered feedback, that they preferred coffeehouse grumbling to riots in the streets, like letting a kettle hiss just enough to avoid boiling over. One story even tells of a sultan who disguised himself and visited a shop in disguise. Whether this happened is debated, but in the tale, he orders the house special. Hears someone call him a stylish tyrant, and laughs so hard he nearly spills his cup. The parrot squawks, suddenly startling you out of your eavesdropping. Gossips, a dish best served hot. It's CAWS. Several patrons chuckle. It's unclear whether the bird's repeating someone else, or just freestyling now. Either way, it's earned another dried fig. You shift your gaze to a new table nearby, where three men sit in close proximity, heads bowed together. They don't speak loudly, but you catch bits and pieces. If he moves troops through Edorn, they say the tax collectors haven't been paid. She refused his gift. Can you believe it? It's hard to tell which is war news and which is marital drama. And you suspect they may be the same thing. That's too is part of the draw. The anonymity. In the coffeehouse, people mingle across classes and stations. A tailor can sit beside a bureaucrat. A soldier might lose at backgammon to a poet. And all are equal before the CEZV. Well, almost all. There's still the matter of the chair hierarchy. Nobody takes the corner cushion unless they're prepared to explain themselves in rhyme. You remember what Yusuf said earlier. The coffeehouse is a mirror. Careful how you look at it. Maybe that's what the spies are really watching for. Not just rebellion, but reflection. What a city thinks of itself. What its people whisper when they believe no one important is listening. And perhaps, just perhaps, what they most hope someone will hear. It gets you thinking about the things you've heard here. The voices and verses. The news filtered through sarcasm. The jokes too risky for daylight. It's like the Empire's subconscious, murmuring over cups and card games. You take another sip. The coffee's gone lukewarm, but you barely notice. The room feels warmer, more alive. Even the silent listener at the back seems less ominous, no more like part of the furniture. He scribbles a note, frowns, scratches it out. Maybe even spies need editors. Or maybe he's just a terrible poet pretending to be a spy so he can get character ideas. Who knows? One thing is certain. In here, everyone's watching someone, listening for something. The room is a breathing, steaming organism fueled by caffeine and innuendo. And you're starting to hear the rhythm. You don't realize it's happening until Yusuf nudges your arm and whispers, "It's starting." Your first thought is, what's starting? A fire, a brawl, a surprise parrot wedding. But then you notice the chairs shifting, tables pushed back, a small space cleared near the tiled stove that radiates heat like a sun made of bricks and soot. Patrons murmur with the hushed anticipation of a sacred ritual or a particularly juicy scandal. And in the center of it all, a man in a deep green robe, with a trimmed beard and a pen tucked behind one ear. He stands like someone who's been preparing all day for this moment, and wants everyone to know it. Next to him, another man slighter, younger, already bouncing on the balls of his feet, like a lute string pulled too tight. He clutches a handkerchief, which seems to be his emotional support fabric. YUSUF grins. Poetry duel. Of course. Because what better way to finish a strong cup of coffee than by watching two grown men verbally spar over metaphor and moonlight? You lean forward as the challenger begins. His voice is soft but steady, sliding between syllables like a reed flute, slipping through reeds. I saw the moon drown in your cup of ink, and still you drank it, not pausing to think. The crowd murmurs its approval. Several heads nod. A woman near the window fans herself dramatically. The parrot yells, "Hot beans." The older man responds with an arched brow and a leisurely sip of his coffee. He sets his cup down with a theatrical pause, then speaks with a gravelly warmth. "I think, therefore, I sip Universe is weak tea, while mine brews storms where the sea meets the sheik's decree." Someone gasps. Someone else snaps their fingers. The parrot does a drum roll with its beak on a wooden beam. Poetry in the Ottoman coffeehouse wasn't some high-nosed activity for nobles and dusty scroll collectors. It was public sport, loud, layered, laced with innuendo. Like verbal fencing necks, the swords are dipped in rosewater and sass. You learn quickly that there are unwritten rules. Start slow, build heat, praise the audience between barbs. If your rhyme involves food, make it sharp. Always keep one metaphor in reserve. Like an emergency biscuit, the duel continues. Back and forth. Love, war, coffee, betrayal, even a full stanza about the tax collector's bald spot. You sip your drink with the reverence of a spectator at a grand tournament. Except instead of knights, there are metaphors. Instead of swords, similes. And instead of cheering, everyone's murmuring approvingly while pretending to be unimpressed. Historians still wonder if these duels were ever truly won. Some say a well-timed line could win you a free cup, or even a kiss. Others claim the only prize was reputational, avoiding public embarrassment. One debated tale involves a poet named Silver Ink, who supposedly bested a royal scribe by rhyming moonlight with bureaucratic oversight, and was then banned from court for a month. Worth it, probably. Another story tells of a woman who arrived veiled, challenged a man who mocked female poets, and left the room speechless after one verse about plum blossoms and pride. No one knows her name. The parrot might, but it's not. Talking tonight's duel is intense, but friendly. No harsh words, just lyrical barbs tossed like spiced almonds. The younger poet's closing verse is sweet, comparing his opponent's wisdom to aged honey and his own nerves to a trembling leaf. A humble flourish. The crowd responds with gentle applause, fingertips tapping ceramic, palms softly meeting like prayer in slow motion. And then it's over. No judge declares a winner. No trophy is handed out, just a quiet shift as chairs are drawn back in. Tea refilled, stories resumed, life resumed. but the room hums a little differently now. Looser, smellier, that strange blend of admiration and relief. Like after a good concert or an unexpectedly civil family dinner, you catch the older poet's eye. He gives a small nod. Respect, YUSUF, leans over your shoulder. You want to try next week? You nearly choke on your coffee. No, he laughs. Not to duel, but maybe to recite. Everyone's got one poem in them, even if it's just about burnt toast or lost socks. You consider that. What would your poem be? Probably something like, in a room of steam and secret smiles, I sip stories by the cupful, forgetting the miles. A needs work. Still, there's a warm satisfaction in knowing the coffee house is also a stage, that behind every steaming cup, someone might be preparing a verse. That poetry, here, isn't a private thing tucked into drawers, it's public, shared, and joyfully flawed. And maybe, just maybe, it's not about perfect lines. Maybe it's about showing up, speaking up, and finding your own rhythm in a room full of stories. You take another sip, close your eyes, and let the last couplet of the night linger like steam on your lips. The poetry has faded, but the buzz in the coffee house hasn't. People stretch, shift in their seats, refill their tiny cups. Somewhere near the window, a snore bursts out and is quickly disguised with a cough. Outside, the light has dimmed, twilight pressing softly against the smoky glass. You are about to ask Yusuf if it's time to leave when he grins and gestures toward a low table being cleared. A thick backgammon board is placed with care. A pair of carved dice roll loose from a silk pouch. Next to it, another table hosts a chessboard, half set with ivory and ebony pieces that look like tiny sentinels in awkward poses. Games begin, he says simply, as if announcing a solar eclipse. You soon realize this is no casual pastime. These are serious men with unserious wages. Not gold or jewels, but bets of bread, extra coffee, the last word in an argument, or the right to recite a personal poem aloud without anyone interrupting. Two men sit across from each other at the backgammon table. One has a long white beard and a turban that tilts dramatically whenever he wins. The other is younger, with sleeves rolled and eyes narrowed like a hunter stalking prey made of triangles and checkers. They begin. Dice rattle like impatient bees in a jar. Counters clack in a practiced rhythm. The older man mutters to himself with the theatrical flair of someone narrating his own epic saga. The younger one barely speaks, but when he does, it's to make dry observations like, that move was bold, like undercooked lamb. A few people drift over to watch, forming loose clusters of commentary. Someone takes bets on who will break first and order another round of coffee. The parrot, now perched near a brass lantern, whistles low and declares, someone's bluffing, which is strange, because there is no bluffing in backgammon. But maybe the bird knows something you don't. You sit with Yusuf and observe quietly. It's not about understanding the rules, which change slightly from table to table anyway. It's about the vibe, the way the men lean in, how every pause is filled with breathless silence, like the space before a good punchline. Across the room, the chess game has taken on a different energy. Less chatter, more eyebrows. The older player rests his chin on his hand, as if attempting to outstare the bishop. His opponent surprisingly young, maybe 16ish, chewing a reed and looking unfazed. Chess, you learn, is seen as slightly pompous in this coffee house, not frowned upon, just observed. From a respectful distance, it's the game of scholars, clerks, and those who enjoy drawing diagrams on napkins to prove a point. Still, even here, the coffeehouse magic lingers. Every move has a story. Every captured pawn is mourned, as though it once paid taxes and raised goats. The younger player finally speaks. If your queen falls, may I recite a poem over her? The older man grumbles but nods. Only if it's short. I have lentils waiting at home. You're struck by how seriously people take these games, but also how joyfully and serious it all is. No money, no high stakes, just pride, memory, and the delicious satisfaction of a clever move well made. YUSUF nudges your elbow. You ever play? You admit you've played chess badly, and backgammon not at all. That's perfect, he says. You'll annoy everyone. He introduces you to a small square board game with uneven tiles and sheep carved into the corners. The name is unclear, the rules even less so, but it seems to involve flicking pebbles across the board while muttering insults about imaginary livestock. You flick, you mutter. You lose spectacularly, but the laughter that follows feels genuine, like warm bread and good conversation. No mockery, just the kind of teasing reserved for welcome guests and brave fools. Historians still debate the role of games in Ottoman coffeehouses. Were they tolerated distractions or essential ingredients in the social stew? Some say the games helped diffuse tension, gave political debates a playful outlet. Others argue that games allowed people to express opinions safely, disguised as moves and metaphors. There's a popular story about a coffeehouse in Damascus where chessboards were removed every Friday, only to be reintroduced with new names like Philosopher's Grid and Almond Arranger, just to confuse the local authorities. Another tale speaks of a sultan who visited a public coffeehouse in disguise and lost 3 rounds of backgammon to a blind merchant who accused him of cheating. The sultan, amused, promoted the man to court entertainer. Or so the story goes. Back in your corner of Istanbul, you're invited to another round of the Sheepan Pebble game, but you decline. Your hand is still recovering, and your pride needs a biscuit. Instead, you sip your coffee and watch the way the games blend with the air, the smoke, the murmurs, the gestures. It's not separate from the coffeehouse atmosphere. It is the atmosphere. The games are conversations, friendly duels, secret languages, and sometimes they're just a way to avoid doing dishes at home. A fresh tray is brought out, more coffee, of course, but also candied fruits, a bowl of roasted chickpeas, and small slices of something sticky and orange that might be apricot or mischief. You lean back and let the rhythm of the coffeehouse flow around you. The games, the laughter, the parrot's occasional cries of "move it" or "check your socks." You don't question it anymore. You've learned something tonight, that even in a world of poetry, politics, and brewing philosophies, there's space for play. Gentle, goofy, sometimes deeply strategic play. And in that, there's comfort, because everyone needs a place where they can win or lose without consequence, where a game is just a game and a cup of coffee is never just a cup of coffee. By now, the sky outside has dimmed into a velvety blue, and the coffeehouse has taken on a quieter glow. Lanterns are being trimmed, their warm flickers dancing across the walls. The earlier bustle of laughter and game night bravado has mellowed into softer exchanges, lending in closer, speaking slower, even yawning with a sort of camaraderie. That's when the door creaks open, and a figure steps in wearing a long dark robe, with a scowl that could sour cream. By USUF, groans softly beside you. Perfect timing, he mutters. You glance around. People are straightening their backs. One man subtly hides his game board under a shawl. Even the parrot lowers its voice. The newcomer is the Cardia local judge, official, respected, and famously inconsistent when it comes to his stance on coffee. You've heard the gossip. Some days he rails against the moral decay of caffeine. Other days, he drinks 2 cups and tells long stories about his pet goat. He steps up to the counter and clears his throat dramatically. By order of His Imperial Majesty, he announces, "Let it be known that the consumption of coffee is again considered haram until further notice." A single almond drops onto the floor. In the silence that follows, someone in the back sighs. Again, you feel a bit panicked. Is this the end of your night? Will soldiers storm in and confiscate your half-finished cup? But the man behind the counter simply nods, places a fresh cup of coffee before the judge, and says, "Double." "Yes." The Qadi hesitates, looks around, then nods curtly and sits down with the grace of a man who just banned something and is now enjoying it anyway. A ripple of laughter, not loud, but sly, passes through the room like steam curling from a pot. You lean toward Yusuf. "So, what just happened?" He shrugs. The coffee ban is more of a suggestion, like telling a poet to be brief. It turns out, coffee was banned several times throughout the Ottoman Empire. Some said it was intoxicating. Others claimed it led to rebellious thoughts, especially when drunk in groups. Authorities worried about gatherings in coffeehouses becoming little political salons. Some religious leaders questioned its legality, especially when paired with games and jokes and parrots, with loose morals. But here's the thing, people loved it too much. Even sultans couldn't give it up. Even Jessius like this, one couldn't resist a good roast. Historians still puzzle over why the bans were declared so often, yet enforced so unevenly. Was it politics, religion, an elaborate bluff? Or maybe, as one scholar suggested, it was a performance, a reminder of power, meant to be dramatically delivered. and then quietly ignored. Whatever the case, tonight it plays out like theater. The Qadi sips his cup, grimaces as if tasting sin itself, and then murmurs, cinnamon, bold choice. No one tells him it's the same blend as always. Later, a pair of local poets approach him with what they call an educational poem on the dangers of caffeine. It's actually just a string of coffee puns and a metaphor about roasted souls. The judge chuckles, drops a coin in their bowl, and says, "You're all terrible. Keep going." It's clear that this place, the coffee house, is not just surviving the bans, it's dancing around them, adapting, winking. One patron jokes that tomorrow the sign out front will read, "Tobacco, tails, and totally not coffee." Someone else offers to draw a camel on the window to distract the authorities. A new tray of coffee is brought out, this one bearing particularly elaborate foam. You notice a tiny leaf pattern on top, art made from milk and rebellion. A sip, warmth, bitterness, spices that hum at the edges of your tongue. And then the judge suddenly philosophical lines back in his chair and begins to reminisce about the first time he tasted coffee. "It was in Bursa," he says, "at a garden tea house. I was 17. The man who brewed it stirred with a goose feather and said nothing for 12 minutes. Everyone nods respectfully, pretending this is a normal origin story." He continues, "After the first cup, I became a judge. After the second, I knew I would spend the rest of my life banning this stuff just to have an excuse to visit the places that served it." The parrot flaps once, then offers a sage, "Hypocrite," and everyone laughs. You realize this scene has likely repeated hundreds of times in different corners of the empire. Coffee banned, people pretending to care, and then quietly, stubbornly returning to their stools and stories. This isn't just about caffeine, it's about claiming a moment for yourself. A sip of peace in a noisy world. A place to gather, argue, laugh, and, occasionally, get told off by a bird. The ban, much like the Qadi himself, is part of the ritual, and by now, you're part of it too. YUSUF clinks his cup lightly against yours, to forbidden brews and public secrets. You clink back, smiling dot, and as the lanterns dim a little more, and the judge begins to doze ever so slightly, you realize something beautiful. The heart of the coffee house isn't in its legality, or its architecture, or even its taste. It's in its defiance. Quiet, stubborn, joyful defiance. That no matter what the world says about bans or rules or morality, someone will always gather in a warm corner, pour something bitter and delicious, and say, "Tell me a story." You don't know how it begins. Exactly. One moment you're half listening to the Qadi snore softly in the corner, and the next, a man with an enormous leather satchel is standing near the hearth, pulling out an object wrapped in embroidered cloth. The room perks up, not dramatically, just in that collective shift of posture that says, "Ah, yes, something is about to happen." He doesn't introduce himself. No one needs him to. The travelers are always welcomed here, like family members, who only come home when the apricots are in season. The man places a small wooden box on the floor and opens it to reveal a glimmering array of greenish beans, not roasted yet raw and wrinkled like ancient olives, still wearing the scent of the places they've come from. Ethiopia, Yemen, Cairo, possibly even Venice. Hard to say. These beans have traveled more than most noblemen ever will. You haven't tasted real coffee, the traveler says, until you've had it, still thinking in another language. You squint at that, trying to pass the meaning. Someone next to you nods wisely, as if it's obvious. The room leans in, just enough. He begins his story. It starts, as so many Ottoman coffee tales do, not in the empire itself, but somewhere much farther south in the hills of Ethiopia, where goats supposedly first danced under the influence of wild coffee berries. Maybe you've heard this one, the goat herd, the strange bouncing goats, the monk who boiled the beans. Charming, possibly apocryphal, possibly true. Historians aren't entirely sure. The goats may have been innocent in all this, but what matters is that the beans spread, not like wildfire, more like mist, softly, persistently, across Red Sea winds and camelback journeys, into the port of Moshe, where the word Moshe was born, before it became a sweet drink with extra foam and a chocolate drizzle. From there, the merchant explains, coffee reached Mecca and Medina, where it was praised by some mystics and condemned by others. Then northward it traveled, into Cairo, Damascus, and finally Istanbul. But it didn't always move peacefully. You're shown a scrap of worn parchment, legible, but dramatic. Apparently, in the early days, coffee merchants were accused of smuggling the beans inside sacks of dates or animal feed to avoid monopoly laws or religious scrutiny. Some were even punished, though punishment sometimes meant being asked politely not to come back until they brought more. Then there was the matter of roasting. Whole debates broke out over how to roast the bean over open flame, or buried in hot sand. Light roast for clarity, or dark roast for depth. A bit like arguing about the best lullaby. Everyone has their favorite, and everyone thinks yours is wrong. Even now, as the merchant pulls out a tiny tin roaster, no larger than a walnut, the crowd leans forward like he's unveiling a holy relic. "I bought this in Bursa," he says. "Traded it for a poem and a spoon carved from apricot. Would..." Someone whistles softly, impressed. "Still works," he adds, and to prove it, he scoops a few green beans into it, holds it carefully over the fire, and begins the long, quiet process of warming the past back to life. The smell is immediate, sharp, sweet, slightly bitter. It wraps around your face like a familiar scarf. You feel it in your spine. Each time you roast, the traveler murmurs, you release all the places the bean has been hiding. There's something deeply comforting about that idea, as though every sip of coffee contains not just flavor, but memory, terrain, language, hands that sorted it, dried it, carried it, spilled a little, and then tried again. You sip the cup in your hand. It suddenly feels heavier. "Do you know," Yusuf says, leaning close, "that in Venice, they once accused coffee of being the drink of devils until the Pope tried it, blessed it, and drank 2 cups. You laugh. It's a ridiculous image. A pope, eyes wide, buzzing with caffeine, declaring coffee holy. But apparently it happened. Or at least something like it. Historians still debate that one too. Was it Pope Clement VIII? Did he actually bless coffee? Or was it just a savvy way to bring in more Ottoman imports without causing a scandal? Either way, the result was the same. The bean kept traveling. It reached Vienna after a certain siege, Paris shortly after, London, where people tried to make it polite, and eventually, all the way to the Americas, where it became both a morning ritual and a corporate battle. But here, in this little Istanbul coffee house, you feel none of that weight. Only the warmth of the fire, the quiet clinking of tiny cups, and the smiling eyes of a man who has walked farther than your dreams usually go. The merchant passes out tiny roasted beans, still warm from the fire. You pop one in your mouth. It's bitter, yes, but also oddly sweet, like burnt sugar and rain. You close your eyes and imagine it growing, far away, on a sun-drenched hillside. Maybe a goat nearby. Maybe a whisper of wind that sounds suspiciously like a poem. When you open your eyes, the merchant is packing up his satchel. No fanfare, no bow. Just a smile, a nod, and a final line. Travel well, even if you stay in one place. Then he's gone, just like that. And you are left with your cup, your thoughts, and a growing understanding that this drink, this humble, powerful, endlessly debated drink, is less about what it tastes like, and more about what it carries. Distance, memory, mystery, and a touch of cinnamon, if the coddy is feeling fancy. The coffee's gone cold in your hand, but no one rushes to refill it. This isn't a place where drinks are measured in volume. It's measured in time, and in company. You sit back on the rough bench, running a finger along the rim of your tiny porcelain cup. There's a chip in the side that looks like a crescent moon. Someone probably dropped it years ago, and rather than throw it out, they just kept using it. That feels right somehow. Nothing perfect lasts long here, but everything used often becomes loved. A new voice begins to speak, not loudly, just with that confident tone that lets you know it's okay to listen. "Do you remember your first time?" he says. He's looking at no one in particular, just out into the air. Like the question is meant for the whole room, or maybe for the walls. "My first cup," he says, "was given to me by a midwife. That perks your interest. Midwives and coffee, now there's a pairing you weren't expecting." He chuckles. "She said it would wake me up so I wouldn't faint during the birth of my own child. She was right, too, though I still fainted. But I did so with a very alert expression." There's laughter, gentle, rolling through the room like waves. You find yourself smiling. Soon others chime in with their own memories. A cup shared after a long pilgrimage. One offered as a peace gesture after a family argument. A bitter brew during mourning. A sweetened one during celebration. Coffee here isn't just a beverage, it's a marker of belonging. A tool of welcome. A comforter. a challenger. You hear stories of lonely widowers who came to the same table every morning until someone finally sat across from them, of poets who wrote one line a day, only after their second sip, of a woman who brought her own copper pot every week and insisted on brewing it herself because the rest of you are coffee criminals. They all laugh again, but there's warmth in it. She's not here tonight, but everyone seems to remember her voice, her hands, her peculiar obsession with cardamom. The atmosphere is quiet, but pulsing with these soft undercurrents of memory, the kind of collective nostalgia that only happens in places built for lingering. And the coffee house is, above all, a place to linger. One man leans his head against the wall, eyes closed, fingers still wrapped around an empty cup. Not asleep, just drifting, like a boat tethered gently in a harbor. You're learning that there's no shame in solitude here. In fact, it's almost celebrated. People come to be alone. Together, the coddy stirs in the corner, groans, and mumbles something about spice taxes, before falling back into sleep. Someone carefully places a folded napkin over his shoulder, like a tiny, respectful blanket. You begin to notice the textures around you more deeply. The way the cushions are worn in the middle from generations of knees. The way the windows fog up from breath and boiling kettles, making the outside world look like a dream you haven't had yet. There's a warmth to this place that isn't just heat. It's in the way people lean toward each other without touching. In the way no one rushes to clear the table. In the way laughter is allowed to fade naturally, like the last note of a lullaby. Then, a younger man speaks. "I used to think I had no place here," he says softly. "Didn't know anyone, didn't speak much. I'd sit in the corner and pretend to read." There's a pause, but one day, someone handed me a cup and said nothing, just set it down in front of me. And that was the first time I felt like I wasn't invisible. The room is quiet after that, not heavy, just still, as if letting the words settle like grounds at the bottom of a cest. You look around, suddenly, aware that this coffee house, this creaky, smoky, low-lit room, has been a place of belonging for people across decades, maybe centuries, maybe longer than anyone remembers. Even now, news stories are brewing in the background. A boy, barely a teenager, is wiping tables while humming something out of key. His father gestures at him to slow down. "We don't serve haste here," he jokes. You wonder if, years from now, that boy will be the one standing by the fire, telling his first cup story. There's something comforting in that idea, that people come and go and come again, that someone else will sit in this same spot tomorrow, reach for a chipped cup, and find the same quiet rhythm you're feeling now. You're no longer a visitor, you're part of the soft chorus, the daily murmur of footsteps and steam and stories that turn a room into a refuge. Outside, a cold breeze rattles the shutters, but inside, someone's stirring another pot. A slow bubbling begins again, promising another round, another conversation, another small connection. You take a deep breath. You belong here, even if you leave. The door creaks open, not a rare sound in this coffee house, but this time it carries with it a hush, one of those slow, collective silences that spreads like a ripple. A small breeze sweeps in, along with a few dry leaves that tumble across the floor like lost messengers, and then they enter. The Janissaries, you spot them immediately. Their uniforms are clean, but not ostentatious navy blue with crimson sashes, the occasional glint of brass buckles. One carries a tall felt hat tucked under his arm. Another keeps his hand lightly on the hilt of a curved sword, though he doesn't look tense. Just practiced. They don't bark orders or stomp dramatically. They simply arrive, and somehow, their presence presses the air a bit flatter. You don't know whether to sit straighter or vanish into the cushions. But here's the thing about Ottoman coffee houses. They belong to the people. That includes the soldiers, even elite ones, especially the elite ones. The Janissaries make their way toward an empty corner, not demanding a table, not asking for service. They know they'll be served, eventually. Everyone is. One of them broad-shouldered, with eyes like cooled iron, catches your gaze, just for a second. And then, to your surprise, he nods. You nod back. Your neck does it before your brain agrees. A tray appears from nowhere, carried by a boy whose nerves are hidden only by the fact that he's gripping the tray like a lifeline. Tiny porcelain cups, a brass pot, still steaming, a plate of sweet lokum, dusted in powdered sugar like fresh snow. The Janissaries speak in low tones, too quiet to overhear, but their posture is relaxed, almost weary, like men who spend most of their lives being symbols. and occasionally just want to sit down without holding the empire's gaze on their shoulders. You're about to turn back to your own half-drunk cup when something unexpected happens. One of the janissaries stall. Lean, perhaps the youngest, raises a hand. A simple wave. The room turns toward him with curiosity. He clears his throat, sips once, then says, "Would the poet be willing to write?" A reply. There's a moment of confusion. Then, a murmur of realization. He's talking to the poet. The one who'd been sulking near the stove since sundown. The one who said he'd sworn off writing anything for the ungrateful masses. That same poet now straightens in his seat, raises an eyebrow, leans forward as if sniffing out whether this is mockery or challenge. A reply the janissary repeats, calmly. "To the girl who sent me a verse last week. She said it was for my heart, not my ears. But my heart is untrained. My ears are better schooled." Laughter trickles through the room, soft, careful, respectful. The poet folds his arms. A reply. "Will cost you," he says. The janissary shrugs. "Name your price." The poet considers. "You have to clear my tab." "There's a beat." "Done," says the janissary. And with that, the room shifts. A parchment is summoned. A pen. A silence settles, warm with anticipation. Everyone pretends to look away while blatantly watching. The poet hunches over the paper, mumbling as he writes. To the bold one who writes in rhymes, "You've cracked a soldier's heart 3 times. He pauses, scratches something out, grumbles. "No, no, too cliché." You lean forward on your elbows, utterly caught in this moment that feels strangely like theater, and yet entirely real. The poet continues, scribbling, occasionally tasting his own words like he's sipping broth. Finally, he signs the parchment with a dramatic flourish and hands it to the janissary. "No refunds," he says. The janissary nods solemnly, folding the reply into a square so precise it might pass inspection. "She'll love it," he says, but something in his expression suggests that maybe he does. The mood in the coffee house lifts just a little. The edges soften again. People return to their games, their muttered conversations, their refilled cups. You watch they're still soldiers, yes, but not just that. Tonight, they're also friends, lovers, poets, listeners, human. It makes you wonder what other roles are hidden beneath uniforms. You hear someone whisper near the doorway. Historians still debate whether the janissaries encouraged or discouraged the rise of coffeehouses. Another responds, they were there either way, with swords, and sometimes verses. Outside, the wind picks up. One of the shutters rattles like a loose tooth. A cat darts in through the open door, curls itself under a bench, and is instantly ignored, proving its full membership in the coffeehouse community. You notice that no one's checking the time. Not the soldiers, not the poet, not you, and certainly not the coffee, which has no concern for hours. It brews and bubbles on its own schedule. All it asks is that you sit long enough to taste it. You sip again. The bitterness has faded a bit. Or maybe you're just getting used to it. The lamps begin to dim, not all at once, but one by one, like sleepy eyes blinking closed after a long, chattering day. A boy with a soft walk makes his rounds, trimming candle wicks with tiny shears that look far too delicate for the task. Yet, he does it well. The flames shrink, flicker, and soften, casting honey-colored halos on the walls. Shadows stretch long and slow across the low ceiling. You're still in your seat, barely noticing that your cup has gone cool. The air has thickened with the final conversations of the night. Words have dropped to a whisper. No one's rushing. Coffeehouse is unwinding. A woman across the room begins gathering game pieces into a cloth pouch, one by one, like seeds before planting. Her opponent yawns in slow motion, rubs the corner of his eye, and waves her a silent goodbye. They don't need to say more. They've shared enough tonight. Jokes, strategy, and a slice of halva. Near the stove, the parrot is asleep, head tucked beneath its wing. It snores, tiny, bird-like snores, somewhere between a whistle and a wheeze. A young boy giggles quietly. His father taps his shoulder, not to scold, but just to signal that it's time. From behind the counter, the coffee master appears. You haven't seen much of him. He mostly let the apprentices handle things tonight. But now, as the closing ritual begins, he steps forward, with slow grace. He gathers the used cups into a wide brass tray, stacking each one with a soft clink. He's not in a hurry. He's done this hundreds of times, maybe thousands. Each cup tells him a little story. This one was barely touched. That one bears the deep ring of 2 refills. That chipped one was used by the man who always tells riddles. You see him pause at your cup. He tips it gently, then smiles faintly, not mockingly, almost like he's proud you stayed so long, and then he moves on. The regulars begin their slow exodus. Not a stampede, but a drift. One by one, scarves are wrapped, shoes shuffled on, backs stretched with the quiet groan of satisfaction. You hear murmured goodbyes, some in Turkish, others in Greek, Armenian, Arabic. It's a choir of warm farewells, stitched together by a shared sleepiness. Someone brushes past you, leaving behind a trail of rosewater perfume and a folded note dropped onto the poet's table. He notices it only after she's gone. He reads it, smiles crookedly, and pockets it without a word. In the far corner, 2 older men are still playing a round of chess. They're bored, lit by a single stubby candle. One finally leans back and announces, "Checkmate," in the most tragic way possible. His opponent nods solemnly, like he's just been defeated in love, rather than strategy. You're reluctant to move. The cushion beneath you has molded to your shape. Your limbs feel heavy in the nicest way, the kind of weight that says, you've rested well. Someone opens a window slightly. The night air rolls in, carrying the scent of damp stone, coal, smoke, and distant fig trees. You inhale deeply, as though you could take it home with you. The last tray of coffee grounds is tossed out the back, scattered onto the street, where tomorrow's stray cats and curious fortune-tellers will find it. The old woman who reads futures in the leftover grounds isn't here tonight, but someone's sure to step in tomorrow. The city always finds a reader. A sleepy voice near the counter offers a final musing. Did you know some coffeehouses used to offer slippers for guests who stayed past midnight? Someone else chuckles. Too late. My shoes have resigned. You glance around and notice the quiet reverence people have for this closing hour. Not because it's grand or ceremonial, but because it's shared. The ending is just as precious as the beginning. Your eyes land on a faded inscription above the hearth. You hadn't noticed it before. The letters are small and almost worn away by years of smoke and time. But if you squint just right, you can make out the message. Come for the coffee, stay for the words. You smile, because you did exactly that. Outside, the city is wrapped in velvet. A dog barks once in the distance, then decides it's too tired to commit. Somewhere, a boat horn sighs along the BOSPHORUS. Inside, the last candle is snuffed with a gentle theft, and now, it's time. Not because someone told you to leave, but because the story has been told. The cups are empty, and the chairs are gently being stacked in a corner. You rise, stretch softly, and follow the slow stream of other night travelers out into the moonlit street. The coffeehouse door closes behind you, not with a slam, but a whisper. The street welcomes you like an old friend, quiet, still, and a little chilly, just enough to tug your robe closer to your skin. Cobblestones stretch ahead, slick with the dew of late night, catching faint reflections from shuttered lamps and quiet windows. You walk slowly, not because you're tired, though you are, but because you're not quite ready to let the feeling go. Behind you, the coffeehouse has gone completely silent. No parrot muttering bedtime poetry, no dice clacking against wooden tables, just the soft echo of your steps and the occasional rustle of laundry left to dry overnight. Istanbul sleeps, but not completely. It's the kind of city that always dreams a little with one eye open. You pass a doorway where an apprentice sweeps yesterday's dust into a neat pile. He pauses when he sees you, offers a lazy nod, then returns to his task. The broom's bristles whisper against the stone. Your path curves gently toward the harbor. The smell of the sea grows stronger, braided with a hint of fish, tar, and saffron. Somewhere down there, a fisherman untangles his nets in the dark. You can't see him, but you know he's there. He always is. You find a low stone wall and sit down. For a long time, you just watch the water. Moonlight dances across its surface, like silver threads pulled taut by invisible hands. The waves aren't loud. They lap, they hush, they promise you everything's fine. From here, you can see the rooftop spires, domes, minarets, all soft outlines in the night mist. And somewhere within them are 100 more coffee houses like the one you left. Some are still open, some never closed. Some have musicians playing lutes until sunrise. Others house quiet arguments over ancient love poems. You wonder who's still awake, which storyteller is finishing their final sentence, whether someone else is sitting just like you, feeling this same drowsy ache of contentment and curiosity. History has never really been about kings or battles. Not here. It's about benches worn smooth by elbows, about steam that curls the same way no matter the century, about strangers becoming familiar over something as small and bitter as a cup of coffee. And now that you've lived a little of it, even just for one long night, the past doesn't feel so distant anymore. You think back on the people you met tonight, the chess players, the gossipers, the parrot, the shy poet with strong opinions about apricots. You remember the man who brewed your first cup, and the woman who read poems as if she were casting spells, each of them etched into your memory like coffee rings on a tabletop. Some of what you saw tonight was true, unquestionably so. You walked into a real tradition, sipped from cups, modeled after ones still preserved in museums, heard stories passed down like heirlooms. But then, some things were less certain. Did coffeehouses really keep parrots as mascots? Did the janissary truly request a love poem? Did the judge ban coffee with one hand while sipping with the other? Historians aren't entirely sure. The records are fuzzy, the accounts contradictory, but that's part of the charm. Ottoman coffeehouses weren't just places, they were atmospheres, the kind where memory and myth blend together until no one minds which is which. You stand, finally, and stretch your arms over your head. Your body thanks you. It feels heavy in the best way, a kind of full-body exhale. You walk back toward your bed, wherever it may be, and think about how many generations have ended their nights the same way, with a story, with warmth, with a little bitterness that fades sweet. And tomorrow, well, tomorrow, there'll be more coffee, more conversation, more questions no one knows the answers to. But for now, you don't need answers, you just need sleep. And now, there's nothing more to do. You've walked the cobbled streets of an empire long gone, listened to the quiet laughter of poets and chess players, sipped your way through 100 tiny stories held in steaming cups, and watched a parrot snore like a tiny accordion. You're no longer in a coffee house. You're in that strange, weightless space just before sleep where nothing hurts, nothing hurries, and even your thoughts have begun to speak more slowly. Let your breathing follow the rhythm of the sea, in and out, like the Bosphorus itself. Rocking gently beneath the night, your shoulders soften, your hands go still. That crease between your brows, the one you didn't know was there, it smooths. All the sounds of the night have faded into a quiet hum. The stories you heard tonight drift around you like warm incense, faint, pleasant, impossible to hold, and perfect for dreaming. Let your mind wander. Now, 2 dimly lit rooms filled with the clink of tiny cups, 2 scrolls of poetry passed hand, 2 strangers who become companions for a few slow hours over strong, bitter brew. No questions left. No lanterns left burning, just the gentle hush of a city that has exhaled, and yet floating somewhere between memory and mist, between Ottoman rooftops and the warmth of your own pillow. You are safe, you are tired, you are allowed to rest. Let sleep take the rest of the journey for you now. The cups have cooled, the words have ended, and the world is soft.